Hello, I'm Henry, and I read a book. I read this book, The Last Don by Mario Puzo, and I would like to talk about it, please. Okay, so you can probably tell from the title that this video will be overtly negative. So I need to say two things up top here. One, I don't go out of my way to read bad books. I don't pick something up knowing it won't be good, knowing I will have a bad time. So me calling this the most boring book I've ever read is looking at a very small sample size of above average books. And two, Mario Puzo is a good author. He's got this smoothness to his writing, a very deliberate and methodical flow that makes it incredibly relaxing. His language can be crisp and businesslike when he wants to, or vivid and thick with description, both of which add to the smoothness in their own unique ways. And it never really ventures into over-the-top territory either. It never becomes overwhelming or too much. He does have a bit of an issue with establishing and maintaining tone, and I don't mean across the whole book. That's actually one of his strengths. The dark realness is set up early, kept up throughout, and added to and adjusted in ways that only benefit the whole. No, I'm talking about tone within individual dialogue scenes when characters are talking to each other. One person will be talking to another and suddenly the dialogue tag will say something like, so-and-so snapped angrily. And I'm like, oh, this is an angry conversation? And you'll sort of scan back and it's like, no, none of these people are getting angry here. And then you'll carry on, and like 3 lines later, that same person who snapped angrily will be like reclining with a witty one-liner. And it's like, what is going on? What is this conversation? This isn't how people function. It got to the point where I started ignoring the dialogue tags. I needed to know who was talking, obviously, but with the descriptors and the adjectives, I felt like I knew better. That shouldn't be the case. That one small issue aside though, Mario Puzo is a good author. He is good at writing. It is what he chooses to write about that is the issue. This is the glaring problem here with The Last Don. But it didn't start here. Now, I'm not about to sit here and slag off The Godfather. It is seminal, and even if the flawless movie never got made, it would still be the thing that all crime fiction is compared to. Any more praise here would just be me reiterating all the justifiable praise it has already received. However, there are aspects of this book, aspects that the movie either toned way down or got rid of wholesale, that, in my opinion, don't really work. Well, I say aspects, it's more like one aspect, one character from whom all the problems stem. Johnny Fontaine. Now, if you're familiar with the movie, you'll know Johnny Fontaine as a minor side character who pops up here and there but doesn't really add all that much. He is not a minor side character in the book. I would say Johnny Fontaine should get third billing in the book, behind only Michael and Vito Corleone. The problem with that is he still doesn't really add all that much. He's detached from all of the incredibly compelling mafia stuff, doing his own thing in California and Las Vegas, and it is incredibly not compelling. But Mario Puzo made the decision to write about it anyway. Remember this for later. The Sicilian is one of the most bizarre bits of written work out there. I've already made a video about it, but I'm not sure in that video I got across just how weird a concept it has. It is a sidequel to The Godfather, set in the middle of that story, released 15 years after it came out, in which fictional man Michael Corleone goes looking for real-life Sicilian outlaw Salvatore Giuliano to bring him back to America. The majority of the story is told from Giuliano's perspective and could be considered a biopic. A biopic that, seeing as we know Giuliano died in real life and isn't in the second half of The Godfather, we know has no bearing on that story, despite having that story's main character running around inside it. It is such a strange thing to write about, but Mario Puzo decided to write about it anyway. I'm glad he did, but I'm not sure that's the intended reaction. I think these two books and the examples I have cited show that Mario Puzo might have a judgment problem of where he should be focusing his considerable talents. The Last Don is a culmination of those judgment problems. Allow me to read you the blurb, and I'm going to make a few comments here and there which will double as the sort of mini review I do of books here. The Last Don is Mario Puzo at his finest. It is not. A masterful saga of the last great American crime family, the Clericuzios, and their powerful reach into Hollywood and Las Vegas. Their reach into Las Vegas is done like that, off screen, right at the beginning. So this isn't about that. And the extent of their reach into Hollywood is one guy going rogue without the blessing of the rest of the family, and that ultimately doesn't go anywhere at all. So this book isn't about that either. Domenico Clericuzio is a wise and ruthless man. If by wise you mean dropping an unironic all according to plan on the second to last page, then yeah, he's as wise as Emperor Palpatine, who in his old age is determined to create a life free from criminal activities for his grandchildren. He's already done that. At the start of the book, all but 2 of his dozens of grandchildren are out of the criminal side of the family. So this book isn't about that either. But as he strives to establish his heirs in legitimate society, as I just said, he's already done that, so no striving necessary, secrets from his family's past spark a vicious and bloody war between cousins. So I've said that this book isn't about the majority of this stuff, but that vicious and bloody war between cousins sounds promising, right? That's surely what the book is about, right? That word spark sounds like an inciting incident if I've ever heard one, right? Wrong, wrong, and wrong. That spark happens on page 365. The book is 482 pages long. The inciting incident happens 76% of the way through. And that vicious and bloody war between cousins isn't so much a war as it is 3 murders. One guy kills another guy's dad, then the guy whose dad got killed kills the guy who killed his dad and his corrupt cop mate. That's it. So if the vast majority of this book isn't about the stuff in the blurb, and the stuff that is in the blurb that it's about doesn't start until the last quarter of it, what is the rest of it about? What does Mario Puzo choose to write about here? Well, that's what makes this the most boring book I've ever read. The Last Don is about 2 things. Every single character's entire life story and endless Hollywood admin. If a character shows up in this book with a first and second name, you had better believe you are about to endure at least 4 whole pages learning every single thing that that person has ever done across the course of their entire life. And this is entirely independent from the position in the book. A person can show up late on, even after that 76% mark, and you will still be given their entire life story. Common literary standards would say maybe don't do that. Maybe if your characters require this much fleshing out, maybe introduce them earlier. Or, here's my 2 cents, don't introduce them at all. There are so many characters, and so many of them overlap, do similar things, or take up similar places in the plot. So just roll a bunch of them together. As an example, the guy who I would consider the main character, Cross Delina, the guy that I mentioned earlier whose dad got killed, is planning an assassination. In the planning of this assassination, we get 3 separate characters' entire life stories. One is via a separate assassination that sort of just springs up before this one, which is a bit of weird structuring. The fuse is lit on one assassination and suddenly this other one just comes along out of nowhere and we go and deal with that one first. So we get the target of that first assassination's entire life story, and that takes up a bunch of time. And it is unnecessary because in his nature as the target of a successful assassination, he dies. He shows up, breaking all flow, we get his life story, grinding everything to a halt, and then he's dead and we barely get any reference of him again. Get rid of this. Don't have this assassination at all. The only point of it is to show that Dante Clericuzio, the guy who kills Cross's dad, is a loose cannon, and to sow a bit of discord between him and Cross's dad. But that is not necessary, because Dante has a very good reason to kill Cross's dad that we find out later. Okay, so now that that pointless and long assassination is out of the way, we're back to planning the initial assassination. And in doing so, we get a paragraph that made me go, oh no, oh no, out loud on the train. This is just over halfway, and at this point I am wise to what is about to happen. Cross resolved on 3 people he needed for the planned operation. The first was Andrew Pollard, who owned Pacific Ocean Security and was already involved in the whole mess. The second was Leah Vartzi, the caretaker of the Clericuzio's hunting lodge in the Nevada mountains. Leah headed a crew of men who also served as caretakers but were on call for special duties. The third man was Leonard Sosa, a retired counterfeiter on family retainer to do odd jobs. All three came under Crostolina's control as the Western Bruglioni. All three of these guys get their full names, so you better believe we're about to get their life stories. Now, luckily for the pacing of this section specifically, we already got Andrew Pollard's life story earlier in the book. I say this section specifically because it did hurt the pacing when it showed up earlier. We're just deprived of it now. But even without it, we still get 8.5 pages of Leah and Leonard's life stories. Now, Leah does become more of a prominent character, so there might be some justification there, but Leonard's a nothing. So why don't we just roll these two together? Get rid of Leonard altogether, give his bits to Leah, intro Leah earlier, and drip his backstory throughout the book. Easy. Or maybe actually hard. That's why it was done like this instead, because this is easy. Aside from throttling any and all progress and momentum the plot may have been building, these life stories do something else as well. They blur the line between showing and telling so thoroughly that I'm genuinely questioning if I ever knew the difference in the first place. Show don't tell, that's the rule, but it's not hard and fast. Sometimes you have to tell, sometimes, like in anime especially, you can show then tell. And sometimes, like here, the telling is so deep and layered that it kind of becomes showing. That might sound like a good thing, but it is not. An example, Claudia Delina, Cross's sister, is driving in her car to go see one of her friends. Claudia is a terrible, pointless character who brings nothing to the table, saps infinite amounts of screen time, and who nearly made me DNF every time it switched to her POV. Her main sins are in the other stuff this book is about, the endless Hollywood admin, remember? But of course, being such a central character means we must have her life story as well. And we get it on this drive. We actually get a bit of it before. We get her very early years when we're force-fed her father's life story. But the majority of it comes on this drive. She starts this drive on page 97 and ends it on page 125. 28 unbroken pages of one character's entire life. A character that ultimately only does stuff of consequence in the story by accident or by proxy or with a degree of separation. It would be outrageous if it wasn't so hilariously brazen. And it's this brazenness that blurs the lines between showing and telling. Her life is told through flashbacks. She's driving and she's sort of just arbitrarily remembering everything that's ever happened to her. And these flashbacks go into detail. We get dialogue and location descriptions and thoughts and feelings. They are scenes in themselves. Do you see what I mean about the line between showing and telling? We are being shown her life, but in an incredibly forced and unnatural way that feels like we are just being sat down and told it. What makes these 28 pages of life story even funnier are the sort of reluctant lines we get here and there, reminding us that we are still in fact in a car going to see a person. Now, Claudia is the most egregious example of these life stories. No other character gets 28 pages of glacial nothingness out of nowhere. But every character gets something, and these somethings are far too much. Think of reading a normal book as having a casual swim in a regular swimming pool. Everything is as deep as it needs to be. Reading this book is like having a casual swim in one of those scuba diving training pools. It just goes down and down and down. Beyond a certain point, it makes no difference how deep it is. If you're just having a casual swim, all you really need is to not touch the bottom. 7 or 8 feet or something will be fine. It being 30 feet deep adds nothing except the work of digging out the pool in the first place. Okay, so that's the first of the two things suffocating this book and any enjoyment I might have found in it. The need to relay every single thing about every single person who just so much as pops their head into the story. Let's move on to the second. The insultingly mundane, infuriatingly worthless, and wretchedly constant looks into the inner workings of Hollywood. Hollywood's got a dark, sleazy, nasty underbelly. Mario Puzo's evidently and rightfully got a very low opinion of the place. So you'd think that a man with this much vitriol about something that deserves a lot of vitriol would have some venomous things to say. He does not. There are at least 7 characters who deal almost exclusively with the Hollywood side of the stuff in this book. They are Eli Marion, Claudia Delina, Bobby Bance, Skippy Deer, Molly Flanders, Dieter Tommy, and Ernest Vale. There might be more, but I genuinely cannot be bothered to check. And what we get is different combinations of these 7 people meeting and talking about movie production. Over and over and over again. I cannot stress to you enough just how boring these meetings are and of how little consequence the vast majority are. They aren't dark, they aren't sleazy, they aren't nasty. There is no vitriolic commentary from the author. There is no tearing into Hollywood as an institution. They barely have any influence on the actual plot of the book. It's just people talking production costs and legal rights and box office projections and distribution fees. It is miserable. I'll tell you, the only thing that kept me sane through all these meeting scenes was picturing Carl Pilkington outside waiting to come in and pitch The Love of a Brain. Now, I said that these 7 characters almost exclusively deal with the Hollywood stuff in the book, but there is some minor overlap with the mafia stuff. You know, the good bits. While the Hollywood stuff does feel like a completely separate book at times and is utterly devoid of interest and intrigue, it is not utterly devoid of point. Because this book is essentially a love story between Crosdelina, who I've mentioned a few times now, and Athena Aquitane, a beautiful, famous, talented actress. The entire Hollywood side of this book is to initiate and facilitate this romance. Athena is a huge part of the Hollywood storyline, but I didn't include her in that list of 7 characters earlier because she is actually brilliant. Her backstory is textured and delivered to you over time, not just sort of thrown at you in one concrete slab. Her actions and position in the plot are compelling and interesting, having a stalker ex-husband and a daughter with autism, and her relationship with Cross is, while a bit rushed, endearing and touching. This is all good stuff. A romance between a young, powerful mafia boss and a beloved actress with a dark past is a brilliant idea. The problem with it is, as I said, how it is set up is what Mario Puzo chose to write about. I refuse to believe that the only way Cross and Athena could enter each other's orbits, meet and fall in love involves me sitting through endless Hollywood admin. Couldn't they just bump into each other at the gym or something? I'd just like to add one more thing about those 7 characters I mentioned earlier. While they are all as bad as each other, being black holes of plot motion and my time, one of them stands out. Ernest Vale is an author who's had some of his best-selling novels adapted into movies. He has a very low opinion of Hollywood and is currently negotiating some rights deals. If I'm not mistaken, this is a self-insert character of Mario Puzo himself. And if Mario Puzo wasn't already dead, I would ask if someone go and check up on him, please. Because this Ernest Vale is not okay. He ends his own life just to contractually screw the movie studio out of money. That is a worrying thing to put in your book. Okay, do you remember when I spoke about Johnny Fontaine? I believe Mario Puzo made a mistake in The Godfather focusing so much on him. He is a boring, uncompelling, quite unpleasant character who adds nothing to the overarching story. However, looking at that book as a whole, he is still very much a side character. A bit part player in the overall crime drama. And the brilliance of everything that surrounds him makes our detours to his storyline bearable. The Last Don is if the roles were flipped. It is relentless character backstories and Hollywood faff, broken occasionally by sudden and amazing bursts of engrossing crime drama. Hello, thanks a lot for getting to the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Next video, more Flanimals. I don't mean like looking at the book more. I mean the next book is called More Flanimals.